Hello, so we are going to look at Intoxication AO1. So you need this for an essay. You get 10 marks for AO1, which is your legal knowledge. And then you could put this in a problem question as well. You could get a question on intoxication, and again, you need the law. So, number one, the burden of proof is on the prosecution to disprove intoxication and prove that the defendant had the mens rea for the crime. Number two, D claims that they were so intoxicated through excessive alcohol or drugs that they did not have the mens rea for the crime. Three, a distinction is made between voluntary intoxication and involuntary intoxication. So, voluntary intoxication is where the defendant chooses to drink excessively or take the drugs. Involuntary intoxication, they are unaware that they have consumed the drink or the drugs. Point 4. The case of Beard said intoxication should be considered an aggravation rather than a defence. So in other words, it should be a bad thing. It shouldn't be a defence. Point 5. We make a distinction between specific intent crimes, where the mens rea has to be intent, and basic intent crimes, where the mens rea is intent or recklessness. Point 6. If intoxication is voluntary, then the defence will reduce a specific intent crime to a basic one. So voluntary intoxication, specific intent is reduced to basic intent. So for example, murder goes to manslaughter. GBH section 18 goes to GBH section 20. Now we have a bit of an issue because there's no lesser offence for theft and attempted crimes, so therefore the defendant is acquitted. And that's a good point to discuss in an essay. Point 7. The case of Majewski. This is a House of Lords case that sets out the law. Voluntary intoxication is never a defence to basic intent crimes because the defendant has the mens rea as they are reckless by becoming intoxicated. There is also no defence of Dutch courage, Gallagher, because the defendant has the mens rea before they are intoxicated. The 9th point, there is no defence if D makes an intoxicated mistake. That's the babysitter case of Fotheringham. There is, however, an exception set out in the Criminal Damage Act 1971 that Jagged, she successfully used it. So she said, if you remember, that she thought her friend would consent to her breaking into her house when drunk. She made an intoxicated mistake and she had a defence. Now, the 10th point kind of links together self-defense, mistake, and intoxication. If you make an intoxicated mistake about the use of self-defense, you have no defense. So Lipman, LSD, Snake case, Hatton, and then the CGIA 2008 all said that an intoxicated mistake about the use of self-defense is not a defense. Now, the 11th point, looking at involuntary intoxication, this may be a full defence to both specific and basic intent crimes. The 12th point, a drugged intent is still an intent, and that is the case of Kingston. Very, very memorable case where they drugged a man who had paedophilic tendencies and then he abused a boy. So a drugged intent is still an intent. The other issue with involuntary intoxication is if a drug has the opposite effect. The case of Hardy, he took his girlfriend's Valium, the case of Hardy said this can be involuntary intoxication as long as the defendant is not reckless. And again, Hardy, good one to discuss. I personally think taking someone else's drugs is reckless, but the judges disagree with me. And then finally, if you underestimate the strength of the alcohol, the case of Allen said this is not involuntary intoxication. So the law, structure it really well and then watch the AO3 video, which deals with evaluation points for an essay.